AI in counselling practice, that's our topic. We've been speaking about it for a few weeks because it is here, it is upon us. We're called upon by our ethical body to look at this. The laws are changing around us. And today we're going to be speaking about understanding consent and the use of data. What do we mean by that, Rory?
What we mean is that when we're asking our clients to use an app or something like that, we're not just saying, oh, it'll be good for you and tick that box. They have to have informed consent. And informed consent means that they must have an understanding of what the app does and also where their data's stored, and crucially, how they can reverse out of it. So if they don't want to use it anymore, can they reverse out of it, click delete, and their data's deleted? And it's really important that every therapist understands that informed consent is a little bit more than saying, just tick this box. It means the person has to have an understanding. And part of that understanding, again, is that the therapist may need to explain what the app does or what the service does, and also how the person can delete their data at the end of it. So be able to understand, be able to teach, if you like, the client what it is, what it does, so the client can make an informed consent. And if you're working with clients who have maybe memory loss or maybe neurodivergent, I think that equals a more careful approach.
Yeah. Oh, and beautifully introduced, Rory. And I think it's a misunderstood area, this. So we are covering the topic of AI, but informed consent is bigger than AI. The ICO calls upon informed consent from the moment that somebody gets in contact with you. So here's the thing. Your prospective client, if they're contacting you online, let's say they go to your website and they're having a look and they love what they see and they think, you know what, I want to get in contact with this person. Maybe you've got a little form on your website that they can click and they can put in their name and their email address and they can maybe send a little message to you. Where is their name and their email going? And where is that message that they are sending you going? Are you requesting informed consent at that front door? So any data, anything, whether it's a telephone number, a name, an email address, or a physical address of a client is their data. And if we hold it or use it in any way, we need to have permission. We need to have informed consent. The informed bit is the important part that we're going to be focusing on here today. And informed means that client fully understands, they've been informed how their data is kept, where it is being kept, who can see it, how long it's been kept for. So if there is a data leak, if somebody comes back and says, I didn't give you permission, how do you say, here's my evidence, this is my evidence that I gave you informed consent. Now, as an example, if you go to counsellingtutor.com, go to the podcast tab, and today we're going to say later on in this episode, go to episode 375, and there's a informed consent download that you can download. Now, this informed consent download, you're going to need to put in your email address so we can send it to you. And we're going to ask you what your name is so we can send it to you and say, hi, Rory, here is your download. But have a look on that little form and you'll see there's a little box. And it's an informed consent box that you have to tick. And it won't actually give you the download unless you tick that little box and say, I have understood why I'm giving my email and what it is used for. And underneath that informed consent box is how we use that information, with a link through to our privacy policy that goes in depth in how that information is stored, where it is stored, etc., etc. So that is informed consent, or an overview of what it is. Not just a pre-ticked box when they get to your website. They actually need to do it themselves.
Yeah, beautifully outlined there, Ken. I think the first position when you come to talking about informed consent is asking yourself a very simple question. Can I explain what the tool does or whatever I'm asking for informed consent for in plain language? And I always say to people, explain it to me like I'm 6, because that way I fully understand. If something's complicated, it's really important to be able to explain it in a way that people understand. And you should be able to describe clearly, say, for instance, using an AI tool, what the tool is for. So what the benefit of it is to the client, what information it collects, what happens to the information, who has access to it, how long is that information or data kept, or whether the data is used for anything beyond the immediate interaction. But when it comes to using apps, you have to be very careful. That app doesn't share the data with other people. And why is that important? It's important because in the world we live in, data is a commodity. It's bought and sold like potatoes and carrots and yams. It's a very valuable commodity. So when you're using any kind of interface that stores your data, you really need to be confident that that data only resides with the person you've given it to or the app you've given it to and isn't aggregated or shared anywhere else. And I think the best place for that is in their data privacy policy. We all use applications that store our data, but can you withdraw the consent later? Can you say, no, I'm not happy with the data being stored there? And the application saying, fine, we'll just delete it. We'll pretend you've never been here. Can you access the data held about yourself or the client? What data is being held?
You might be saying, I don't give any apps to my clients. I don't give them anything, so I don't have to worry about this. But we do, because we're collecting clients' data, whether it be in our emails. How do you take your notes? Maybe you subscribe and use a note-taking app that is for counselors and psychotherapists, and maybe that is even beautifully protected. We spoke a few weeks ago about some of the apps are really comprehensive. They comply with data protection. But if you think about it, if you're using that application, you're going in, and you may be putting in your client's name. You may be putting their emergency contact details. You may be writing notes about how they present. You may be taking their documentation that they may have shared with you. You may have an assessment that you've placed in there. You may have a referral letter from another agency. You may have some history on them, so their mental health history or their medical history, medications that they are taking on. As we've already shared, that is protected data. And even if that is the most secure application in the world, and you're 100% confident that none of that data is going to leak out, your client still needs to give informed consent. So you would need to say, when engaging that client, this is what I use for taking my notes. This is who it is. This is the agreements with them. This is the data processing agreement I have with them. And they have a right to say no. They also have a right on 3 sessions time to go, you know what, I've been thinking about you taking my notes and I don't want you putting them in that application anymore. So it's an ongoing relationship. And this includes things like, let's say I'm going to meet with my client and I've decided that Zoom is what I'm going to use. I'm seeing this client remotely. If I say to my client, go and sign up for Zoom so that we can meet, we're telling them to go and use an app. We're saying, go over there, put your name and email address in and share it with somebody else. We're asking them to do that in order to engage in therapy with us. So you would have maybe an information sheet about what Zoom is and how they protect your data, a link to their privacy policy, so that we're helping our client understand what it is that they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're protected, or in some cases, the vulnerabilities of that. So, for example, Zoom is a for-profit company, even though you can have a free account, and the data is stored in the United States of America, so it's not covered by UK GDPR, but you're only sharing your name and email address, so it's very few details. We might put something like that in an information sheet for a client. If you're listening to this and going, oh, this is terribly complex and I don't want to know about all this stuff, it's raising my anxiety levels, stick with this podcast, because we're going to, in future episodes, speak about your privacy policy in your practice, and we're going to show you how to put it together in simple terms, all the headings you need to be thinking about, and where you can get the information without being legally minded or understanding data protection in great detail. We're going to show you a simple way of doing that. So we've said that consent is a process. It's not a moment in time. You revisit it all the time. There is the right to be forgotten. That is an option. in counselling and psychotherapy, if you think about it, we keep our notes and we keep the client's details for a certain amount of time based on the laws and also our ethical bodies. What do you do if a client says, I don't want you to have any of my details anymore? Well, this is session 5 and I want you to delete it all. I don't want any mention of me in your records. That's an ethical challenge there. You'd need to balance your requirements by law to hold details for a certain amount of time with that client's right to be forgotten. And that's a great thing to speak to peers and supervisors about. Are we able to cut out all the jargon, all the complex talk, and make that really simple and easy to understand? And that contracting conversation, I think this is really important. This is the kind of conversation we're having before we start therapy, because by the time we start therapy, we already have the name, maybe an assessment form, we've got a lot of details. So it's a great opportunity to revisit your initial contract and mention this within that. The limitations and risks of AI for emotional support, we've already said you might be putting that into your contracting. That's informing your clients if they choose to consent to use an app outside of your therapy, go on ChatGPT and explore their own challenges there. And of course, we give that invitation for the client to revisit this anytime within the therapeutic journey, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also say that if you're reading this and you're thinking, oh, so much to do, I'd signed up to be a therapist, not a lawyer. We're all in the same boat. Ken and myself are in the same boat as the therapist who works down the road from us, because this is the brave new world of data protection. When we started, it was very different. When Ken and myself started as practitioners, it was very different. But as data is now becoming a kind of commodity to be bought and sold, protection needs to be put in place to make sure clients' sensitive information doesn't end up sold on to a third party. Can you imagine client gets a phone call from someone saying, I believe you're in a bit of a difficulty at the moment. We've just got some data to say we might be able to help you. How did you get hold of that? Is my counsellor given that away? Probably not. But if you're using applications that share data, there's a real possibility that the data can be shared to a third party who may very well use it to try and sell something. It's something we have to think about. And one final thought before we roll out of this is that ethical consent is a process, not a one-off event. So really, therapists need to keep up to date with the latest kind of updates of the law or the interpretation of the law. And I think the best place to go is the ICO website if you're in the UK, which is the Information Commissioner's Office. If you're not sure, please ring them up. At times I've rung them up and they've been super helpful. They're not out to catch you out. They're not there to set traps. They're genuinely there to give you really good, up-to-date information and, in my experience, help you with your business. They're very business friendly. I use business with a very tiny b. If you're a practitioner and you're charging for your services, then technically you're in business. So they're very supportive.
They've got a great website. And as a therapist, if you're in private practice, certainly you will be a member of the ICO. You will have an ICO number. We've mentioned that a few times. If you're not a member, really do yourself a favor. If you're holding any data, just go and register with the ICO. They've got great services. And they even invite phone calls as well. If you've really got a sticky situation, and we spoke about that right to be forgotten, that's a sticky situation. That's something you might phone the ICO and say, what do I do in this situation? We've got a handout, as we always do. It's a Rory super duper handout. Where do you get that? You go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the little box to download it, click the informed consent button. Look out for it when you go there, and that will be delivered to your inbox.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video valuable. For more free resources, have a look at our YouTube channel or visit counsellingtutor.com